Thank you, Irvin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Like Irvin said, type your questions in the chat. And if there's something specific, don't give out any specific information on there. And I will hopefully try to get to through the questions at the end, okay? So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, and you guys all can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick overview of the 23-24 California Dream Act application. I'm sure you're probably already aware that the application opened October 1st. So every year it opens October 1st for the following academic year. It feels like we're just starting our this 22-23 academic year, right? And we're already on to the next one. So if you haven't started it, I encourage you to hopefully start it after today, and hopefully I'll get some of your questions answered. Now, again, this is a quick overview of what the application requires from the student. First and foremost, if you're a dependent student, it does require parent information. So if you're a dependent student, report your parents' information. You're going to need their tax information for 2021. So 2 years back, 2 years prior, and that's how it's going to be for every single academic year. Just think, every year it's going to be 2 years prior in terms of tax information. If you're an independent student, you will report your information. If you are married, then you will report your spouse's information. A lot of the questions that we get, this is a very popular question that we get. Oh, how do I become independent for financial aid? Or I heard I get more money for financial aid if I'm an independent student, or if I filed taxes on my own, therefore I should be considered independent student. Not necessarily. We do follow the guidelines of the Federal Department of Education. Therefore, California also follows the same exact guidelines. And the requirements to be considered an independent student are these that you see on the screen. So you have to be 24 years or older, married, a grad student, a vet, provide more than 50% of your support for your children. This one can get a little complicated if you do fall under that requirement. If you were in foster care at any age or at any time after the age of 13, emancipated minor, or unaccompanied homeless youth. So these would be what would consider you an independent student. Now, there are specific scenarios or circumstances where, you don't fall under any of these. At that point, you'll reach out to us, and then we will proceed with what is called a dependency override. Not every student qualifies for a dependency override. You'll have to talk to a counselor, to myself, to see if you would qualify for it. And then we would go through a review and see if that can be done. Therefore, you would be from a dependent student to now an independent student. Now, also, who is my parent? Nowadays, we don't so much necessarily see the family, right? Like mom and dad, we can see mom is remarried, or, there's a step parent in the picture, stepmom. You split your time between households, so on and so forth. So in terms of your CADA application, it does require parent information. So sometimes students aren't sure, who should I be considering a parent, right? So for reporting purposes, a parent means your legal, biological, or adoptive parent. These would be the only two, terms that you can consider for if you're a dependent student for whose information you're going to use. So if you maybe were raised by grandma or grandpa, unless they adopted you, you're not including their information as parent portion, right? So whose information are you including? This is a pretty good chart. It says if your parents are legally married, right? They either got married through a church, through city hall, anything of that sort, whether it was in the state of California or in a different state, those would be, you would need both of their information, right? That means that they are legally married. If your parents or biological parents live together but are not married, then you will also need both of their information. And when I say information, it means, personal information, but also tax information. If you live with one parent more than the other parent for the past 12 months, report information of the parent you live with the most or lived with more. So does this make sense? So if you split your time and you spent 7 months out of the year, right, with one parent, and then I don't know, maybe in the summertime or a little bit more than the summertime, you go with your other parent to live with, you're going to report the parent that is, for lack of better words, assisting you financially the most, right? If your parent is remarried, report both parents. So even though one parent didn't necessarily adopt you, right, but they are legally married, you're going to report your biological parent and the step parent. If your parent is not married, if it's a single parent, then you will only report one person. The following are not considered parents unless they have legally adopted you. So again, I'm going back to this widowed step parent. So if your biological parent passed away and your step parent is a living parent, you are not going to report that person on your application. A foster parent, again, not reporting their information. Legal guardians, older siblings, aunt or uncle, grandparents, these are not considered your parents, therefore you're not including their information. At this point is when you would probably reach out to us and we would consider a dependency override, okay? So I hope that clarified, if you had any questions regarding that, I hope this clarified a little bit of that. Next is who are we going to include on our CADA, right? Who lives in the household, who's going to college. For dependent students, include, of course, yourself, even if you don't live with parents. So let's say that, parents live up in Sacramento or, San Diego, whatever the case is, but let's say you're dorming here, or you live with a relative, but you still have communication with your parents. Obviously your parents are in the picture. You're going to include yourself, your parents, your parents' other children. So if we read a small print, I want to avoid kind of going through the small print just because, because of time, we don't have too much time. But it says your parents, other children, even if they do not live with your parents, there could be another sibling in college, right? If your parent will provide more than half of their support between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. Again, keep in mind, this is for next academic year. Other people that live with your parents provide more than half of their support, and your parents will continue to provide more than half of their support during the academic year. So this could be a grandparent, this could be maybe your mom's sister that your parents are financially supporting 50% or more of the time. You're going to have to include those people. Same thing with who will be attending college during the academic year. Again, if you have a brother or a sister, you'll include them as well. For independent student, it's the same, same guidelines. You're including yourself, your spouse. If you're married, not separated, right? So if married only, dependents, any children or other dependents that you live with, that live with you during the 23-24 timeline that is referenced there. And again, who will be attending college. So those are the people that you'll be including on there. A very common one is students won't report or won't include their sibling that's at Santa Barbara or UCLA if they're dorming. So make sure you are including them even though they're not living in the household, but they're obviously part of the household size as a unit, right? Financial information that, again, we will need will be notice everything's for 2021. So your 2021 income tax return, if you filed, again, this is for you or your parent or your spouse. Schedule 1, and I'll go over that. Adjusted gross income, income tax, wages. These are the questions that you will be asked on your CADA. Total cash balance, investments or business worth, additional financial information, untaxed income, or any emergency stimulus or emergency funding to be excluded. So this, again, this last little bullet here can get a little confusing as well, because, you know, some of us received stimulus checks, right, or government assistance during the pandemic. We don't have to include those on the application. So it can get a little confusing, but those are to be excluded. Now, this is how the 2021 tax form looks like. So if you don't know how it looks like, or if if you don't know if your parents completed one, maybe you can ask them and try to, you can Google it. You can Google 2021 1040. And this is what it'll look like. This is what you're going to be using. So notice at the very top, you see the 2021 income tax return, and it does give you the filing status. So it's very little. I don't know how clear you can see it, but you'll have a box checked off, or your parents will have a box checked off that says, how did they file? Was it single, married, filing jointly, separate, head of household, so on and so forth. The common lines that we use when completing your application are lines 1, your wages, 2021 wages. Line 10A, if you file the Schedule 1, and this is additional income. So, and again, I'll go over that in a few minutes. And line 11, adjusted gross income. So this is kind of all the earnings that you or your parents had for 2021. On the application, when you're completing your application, is very easy. I know that, sometimes you lack time, or maybe sometimes patience. There is a small print on there, and it will tell you, look at line 8A, add it with line B, or, subtract it from line 7. It seems a little tedious, and it can be, but I promise you that it's very easy if you just follow along. And I'm going to pedal back a little bit where, I mentioned the application opens October 1st. Because the application can be a little lengthy, I recommend that you guys start it on time. And that way, when you get bored or when you're tired of doing it, you can save it and stop and come back, rather than rushing through it, because then we'll miss these things. And that's where we, delay the process of awarding you on time. So to get back to our slide, this is a continuation of the form. Line 20, if you see it on there, very small, you see where it says Schedule 3, and then line 23, Schedule 2. So sometimes we'll ask for additional documents. We'll say, oh, hey, your taxes say that there was a Schedule 1, but you didn't submit it. You probably missed that little line where it says, you probably missed line 20 or line 23, where you're supposed to submit a copy of Schedule 1. Oh, sorry, what happened to my Schedule 1? Oh, I think I didn't include my Schedule 1. Anyways, so this is Schedule 2. Schedule 1 looks exactly the same, except, on the corner, you'll see where it says Schedule 1. So if you have Schedule 1, 2, or 3, you'll need to submit a copy to us, okay? Along with these other forms that I went over. And again, this is in the case that we are requesting these copies. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to submit them, but it's good that it's good that you're aware of what they look like, where you can find them, because, we might need them. So common mistakes. I want to see what time it is, make sure I'm not too behind. Common mistakes that we see on the CADA application. So when you guys are completing your application, notice during the time that you're filling out the application, it does detail on the very top of the application. It gives you like red check marks or exclamation marks where it's, it's kind of informing you, hey, you need to go back, you need to fix something because something doesn't make sense. So required questions that are left blank appear in red. Tab sections contain any errors. And again, with red exclamation points. So these are also common mistakes. Sometimes you know, like I mentioned earlier, we're not reading thoroughly through the application, so we're kind of rushing through it, and we miss certain important small details that can make a difference when completing your application. So keywords to keep in mind are as of today, you know, as of today, the day that you're completing the application, right? Some people will say, oh, well, you know what, I'm going to get married in, you know, August 2023. But if you're completing your application today on October 12th, you know, you're going to put your current marital status. So make sure that you're reading those carefully, those questions carefully, because, you know, it can just snowball into a bigger issue with financial aid. Well, we'll say, well, you told us this, but you're really not married, or we need your spouse's taxes. So it can become a bigger problem than it really, we should have just avoided it by reading those small instructions, right? These are, again, questions. As of today, what's your cash balance? It will ask you that question. You guys are probably familiar with that question. Some students will say, oh, well, you know, in the summer, I had $2,000 saved. Should I put that? No, it's not asking about the summer. It's not asking about 2 months ago. It's asking as of today, the day you're completing your application. Another one that students tend to make a mistake on is on or after July 1st, 2021. For 23, it's going to ask for 2022. So on or after July 1st, 2022, you know, were you homeless, or did you already have a high school diploma or a bachelor's degree, right? So those are your key words. Again, dependents living with other with parents. Remember, during the time frame, we're looking at those dates. In 2021, what were your wages? Again, keep in mind the dates. Some students will say, oh, well, my current wages right now are, you know, $3,000 less than last year. Well, we're not asking for right now, we're asking for the previous year, right? So the point I just want to make with this is that you are mindful of the time frame that you're being asked about, okay? Don't complicate yourself. I know it can be confusing, but it's very, you know, as simple as you read it, that's as simple as you can answer it. Again, adjusted gross income earned and taxes paid. This is another mistake that we see, because some students do rush through the application. They'll double the number. So they'll answer, you know, their AGI, their adjusted gross income for 2021 was $13,500, and the taxes paid were also $13,500. So they're doubling their income, right? So it's an error sometimes, or the application is not going to flag that as an error. It's going to say, oh, okay, you know, you just made about 30 grand, right? But once we're verifying if you are selected for verification, we'll catch it. If you're not selected for verification, because not everyone is selected for verification, we're going to miss it, and you're probably not going to receive aid, because it's reading that you've made, you know, more than enough money. And again, this is an example that I'm giving you guys. Last but not least, you do get a confirmation page. So notice this little example here. It says confirmation page. So sometimes students will just see, you know, confirmation page, and they assume, great, I submitted it. I'm good to go. The school's going to receive the application. No, make sure you're reading any notes or any bullets that you're seeing on the confirmation page. So here it says, unless resolved, this application will remain incomplete, no EFC. So that means that no expected family contribution was produced. That's the number that financial aid wants to see to determine your aid. So if that is not, if we can't determine that when you submit your application, then our office cannot determine your aid. See, notice on this, it says the amount you reported for your parents' income tax is equal to the amount you reported for their adjusted gross income. So it's giving you an idea, okay, you need to go back. It even tells you the question that you need to go back to. Notice here under the question 90, it says found on the IRS Form 1040, line 22, minus Schedule 2. So it details out what it is exactly that you need to do in order to resolve the issue. Okay, next, citizenship status. You're always going to, as long as you are completing the CADA application and your status has not changed, you're going to answer, I am not a citizen nor an eligible non-citizen, okay? Sometimes we can make mistakes on that as well. If you make a mistake, you know, it's fine. We can always fix them. Just, this is where, again, I remind you, make sure you're reading thoroughly, make sure you're slowing down, don't rush through the application. That way we avoid these mistakes, because it sometimes can take us a little bit longer to you know, to fix them. Okay, so if an error was made on the application or the student's legal name is changed, CADA applicants can submit changes to their name or date of birth using the date of birth change request form G19. So some students will, a very common mistake we see is the school record name that we have on file doesn't match your application. So you're missing, you know, some students have two last names, or some students have an initial for a middle name, or they put their middle name on the CADA but not on school records, so on and so forth. That is very common. So you can fill out this form, and I'm not saying don't fill it out, but sometimes the easiest thing for students to do is either update school records or update the application. If you update the application, you'll go back to your CADA and make the change. If you want to update it with the school, then you'll have to go through A&R, admissions and records, to fix the mistake. I do have one student that she's missing a name on her application. She's missing a name. She's missing a letter on her name on the CADA. So the school records has the correct name, but her CADA is missing a letter. So, you know, she's been trying to fix it. We've been working with this, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 months maybe. And for some reason, you know, she's having a hard time fixing this. But she submitted this form, contacted the school, CSUN, California Student Aid Commission. And, you know, sometimes, unfortunately, things take longer than they should. It's not something she needs to fix with the school, because the school records have the correct name, but the application, you know, CADA application is missing a letter. So we cannot, you know, technically load her application. So keep those things in mind. You know, don't rush through typing your name, right? Because it can create a problem. Application conversions. So there are some times that a student will complete a FAFSA application instead of the CADA, or vice versa, they'll complete the CADA instead of the FAFSA. When a student makes this error, we, of course, again, can correct it. They will need to submit the G55 form. So we want to make sure that this is submitted, because technically what happens is all your information just gets swapped over, right? So let's say you were really supposed to submit a CADA application, but you completed a FAFSA. For some reason, you know, sometimes counselors will tell students, this mostly happens, high school counselors will tell students, oh, it's okay, complete a FAFSA. But really, they should have completed the DREAM Act application. And we'll need them to submit this to ensure that the application has the date before the deadline of March 2nd. The March 2nd deadline is very, very important to everyone here in financial aid and students, of course, because that's the date that we look at when awarding you any grants. So if you completed your application after the March 2nd deadline, more than likely there's not going to be any funds left at that point, and students, you know, won't qualify for any aid. So by completing this form, this is making sure that we're going to obtain that March 2nd deadline. You know, this is your proof. Hey, this student completed the application before the March 2nd deadline. Therefore, you know, you'll probably be eligible for all types of grants. Another reason why students can use this form is if at the time they completed the application, they were with an undocumented status but have now gained residency or citizenship. So at this point, they're now eligible for FAFSA application. So again, in this case, we will submit, or the student will submit the G55 form to convert the applications, right? They're just going to convert the CADA to a FAFSA. The CSUN, California Student Aid Commission, will let the school know once this happens, and then we will kind of work on the application in the back scenes, right? So just to kind of go over some of the errors, name variations, right? So again, make sure you include all of your names, or any letters, initials. Mixing up student and parent sections. So again, sometimes students will input the parent tax information with the student tax information, or swap it, vice versa. Grade level, make sure you're including, if you're a junior, senior, that also affects Cal Grant eligibility. Household size, listing of only one college. That's not very common. I don't see it too much within our office, but I guess CSAC, it's probably very common with the commission. AGI, again, the adjusted gross income versus taxes paid. Missing parent signature. This one, I cannot emphasize the importance of this one, because if you're a dependent student, it does require parent signature. So your parent does have to sign the application. So it's not a physical signature. It's a PIN number. There are cases where you can, or special cases where it does require a parent signature, like a physical signature. But nonetheless, missing the signature before submitting the application. If we don't have a parent signature and you're a dependent student, your application is not valid. So financial aid cannot move forward with awarding you or determining your aid. Your AB 540 affidavit, that I'm sure you guys have all already submitted that. That means, you've submitted your the form to admissions and records, kind of just letting them know, hey, I attended high school here. That way you can get state tuition and not non-resident, right? And not submitting application by the March 2nd deadline. That's, again, another error, another mistake, because we want to ensure that we're maximizing your financial aid. Therefore, applying by the deadline of March 2nd will ensure of that, okay? And not only state, funding, institutional funding as well. That's kind of any type of financial aid, but also scholarships. A lot of our scholarships, the requirement is, did the student submit their CADA by March 2nd? Or even FAFSA, if you have maybe a sibling or a friend that are FAFSA filers, it will also ask for the March 2nd deadline on applications, scholarship applications. So at this point, you've submitted your application. What happens next, right? So if we're talking about your 23-24 application, it's very early on right now, but if you've already done it, great. If you're in the process of it, also, kudos to you. Once it's submitted, we won't really start loading those applications till, I believe, sometimes December, maybe February. It really depends. And then we'll start letting you know, those 20% of students that get selected for verification, we'll start letting you know, okay, you actually need to submit a copy of your taxes or your parents' taxes, or, your W-2s, certain, there could be a whole list of documents that I could go over, but we're letting you know, you need to submit something, to us in order for us to determine your aid. Then once that's submitted, we'll review it, we'll award and coordinate. So what that means is that we will make sure that we're awarding the correct amount, based again on the information that you've submitted to us or provided to us, and you'll receive payment. So any financial aid will be applied to your balance, and or you'll receive a refund, or you'll have a small out-of-pocket payment that was not covered by financial aid. Disbursements do get made 10 days prior to the start of the semester. So for this current year, at this point, you probably have had your financial aid dispersed. Your next disbursement would be for spring, or the next disbursement that we'll make is for spring, and we'll make it 10 days before the start of the semester. Deadlines to keep in mind, again, March 2nd deadline. I'm not putting on here October 1st, but please write that down on your calendars and put it on there. You know, you can go on your phone and like repeat every year, do that. So you guys are on top of when to submit your application on time. And April through May is usually when we have our priority document deadline. So what this means is that if we've already started telling you in December, March, hey, you need to submit these documents to us, around April or May, we have a hard deadline. So what that means is that all the students that submit their documents before that deadline that our office gives, you'll be awarded aid and will not require a tuition payment if your financial aid, you know, is covering that. So again, keep that in mind. If you submit these documents and we are not done reviewing them, you will be protected, meaning your disenrollment will not occur to you because you haven't been awarded aid. That means that financial aid is taking care of it at the moment. So you don't have to worry about making a payment until we determine that aid. And that's kind of it. This is a link for if you need help with your application. The Dream Center does have you know, assistance for you guys. So there's this link. I don't know if we can share that maybe on the chat. And then this here is our workshops for financial aid. They're open to everyone, whether it's FAFSA or your kid application. We have 4 workshops coming up. The dates are on here. They're from 2 to 4. You can scan the QR code for more information. And I really recommend to come and attend because it's like one-on-one. All the counselors will be there and they'll walk around. You know, you can bring your laptop, or I believe there's also computers available to you. You can work on your applications. And if you have questions, we're there to help you on the spot. You don't have to stay for the whole thing. You can also just stop by if you know, if that's what you want, or if you just have one question. But I really encourage you all to attend because it's, you know, it really helps you just kind of get it out of the way. And it's right before the Thanksgiving break. That way you don't have to worry about doing your application during the break. And, you know, this is our contact information. So I'm going to leave up this one probably for now. And I think that kind of covers everything for me. I think we have a lot of time, right? remaining for any questions.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. I see some on the chat. Okay, I don't see any on the chat actually. Do you guys have any questions for me? No?